More creepy tales of Amish witchcraft. In the heart of Amish country, where simple living and faith guide every aspect of life, there exist tales whispered around hearths and over barn-raising dinners. These stories, passed down through generations, speak of the supernatural and the unexplained, dark forces that sometimes cross the boundary into our world. The following tales recount encounters with witchcraft and malevolent spirits that have shaken even the most steadfast souls among the Amish. Listen on, if you dare, and discover the eerie events that lurk in the quiet corners of these tranquil communities. The Hex Sign. Jacob, a young Amish farmer, stood in his barren field, his eyes fixed on the intricate hex sign fashioned by old Betsy. The eerie silence of the night was broken only by the rustling of the corn husks and the whisper of the wind through the wilting stalks. Jacob's desperation had led him to seek out the widow's folk magic, but little did he know the dark forces he was about to unleash. Jacob had followed Betsy's instructions, placing the hex sign in his field and guarding it vigilantly. However, as dawn broke, he discovered the sign torn apart, its remnants scattered across the field, and a sense of dread washed over him. Determined to save his crops, Jacob gathered the pieces of the hex sign and attempted to reassemble it. As he worked, a chilling wind whipped through the field, carrying with it an eerie whisper that seemed to mock his efforts. Jacob persisted, his hands trembling as he tried to recreate the intricate pattern. But each time he neared completion, the wind would gust, scattering the pieces once more. Frustration and fear battled within him as he realized that the hex sign alone might not be enough to counter the powerful magic working against him. Refusing to give up, Jacob sought out Betsy once more, pleading for her help. The old widow, her eyes filled with a knowing gleam, agreed to craft a new hex sign, more potent than the first. Under her guidance, Jacob placed the sign in the center of his field, his heart pounding as he recited the ancient incantation Betsy had taught him. As the words left his lips, the wind stilled, and an unnatural silence descended upon the field. For a moment, Jacob dared to hope that the counter magic had worked, that his bewitched crops might be saved. But as the days passed, Jacob realized that the price of the counter magic was higher than he could have imagined. While his crops flourished, a darkness had taken root in his soul, a constant whisper in his mind urging him to delve deeper into the forbidden arts. And so, Jacob found himself torn between the salvation of his livelihood and the damnation of his spirit, forever bound to the hex signs and the power they wielded. The Broucher's Curse. As the bishop and his wife kept watch over their ailing son, rumors began to spread among the Amish community. Some whispered of a hex being placed upon their beloved bishop's family, while others spoke of a curse that had befallen them. Superstitious whispers soon turned into fervent prayers as the Amish community sought to protect themselves from the dark forces at work. The bishop's wife, Rachel, refused to believe in such superstitions. She clung tightly to her faith and refused to give in to fear. But as Ezekiel's condition worsened with each passing day, even Rachel began to question whether there was some truth to the rumors. Desperate for answers, Rachel turned to an old Broucher, a healer who was skilled in folklore magic. The Broucher confirmed Rachel's worst fears. Her son had been cursed by someone with powerful dark magic. Driven by desperation and love for her son, Rachel begged the Broucher for a way to break the curse. The Broucher agreed to help, but warned that breaking a curse would come at a great cost. Rachel returned home with instructions from the Broucher. She must create a poultice made with specific herbs found deep in the forest and apply it to Ezekiel's body every night until the full moon rose on All Hallows' Eve. With no other options left, Rachel followed the Broucher's instructions dutifully. As she trekked through the forest, gathering herbs under the light of the full moon, she could feel an ominous presence watching her every move. But Rachel pressed on, determined to save her son. Then, on All Hallows' Eve, as she applied the poultice one final time, she felt a sudden chill run down her spine. In that moment, she knew that something had changed. Whether for better or worse remained yet to be seen. But then as dawn broke on All Saints' Day, Ezekiel woke from his fevered slumber, his body miraculously cured. As Ezekiel opened his eyes, the bishop could see the relief and joy on his son's face. The fever was gone, and he was whole once again. But in that moment, the bishop also knew that their lives would never be the same. Indeed, the curse had been lifted, but at a great cost. The vow of obedience to the old folk ways weighed heavily on the bishop's heart, but he knew it was necessary to save his son. As they returned to their village, word of Ezekiel's miraculous recovery spread among the Amish like wildfire. The villagers rejoiced and praised God for delivering their beloved bishop's son from such a grave illness. But as time passed, tensions began to rise within the Amish community. Some saw the bishop's actions as a betrayal of their faith, while others were fearful of what consequences this new obedience would bring. Bishop Isaac continued to wield his power over them, reminding them of their vow whenever they strayed from tradition. And even though Ezekiel may have been cured, he was forever marked by the hex, both physically and emotionally scarred. The bishop struggled with his decision every day, torn between his love for his son and his duty to God and the church. In the end, he learned a valuable lesson, that sometimes the greatest threats lie not in the outside world, but in the secrets and traditions that bind a community together. And though he may have saved his son's life, at what cost? The Witching Jar. In the eerie stillness of the night, Anna stood over her neighbor Ida's grave, her heart heavy with the weight of suspicion. The moon cast an ethereal glow on the weathered tombstone, its light seeming to whisper secrets of the dark arts. This was clearly becoming a supernatural thriller that would unravel the mystery of Ida's alleged witchcraft. Anna knew that Ida had cursed her, causing her beloved cow to die under mysterious circumstances. She had originally tried to confront Ida about a land dispute, but the old woman had only responded with cryptic threats and sinister smiles. Determined to protect herself and her farm, Anna had followed her grandmother's advice and gathered personal items belonging to Ida. She carefully placed the strands of hair, eggshells, and a tooth into a jar, along with shards of mirror, pins, needles, and vinegar. As she buried the witching jar at midnight, Anna whispered an incantation, pleading for protection against Ida's malevolent powers, even from beyond the grave. Days turned into weeks, and Anna's farm remained untouched by further misfortune. She began to wonder if the witching jar had truly worked, or if Ida's curse had simply run its course. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she found herself drawn back to Ida's grave, seeking answers. Under the light of another full moon, Anna dug up the witching jar. As she unscrewed the lid, a gust of wind whipped through the cemetery, carrying with it an eerie whisper. "You cannot escape my curse, Anna. It lives on, even in death." Anna's blood ran cold as she realized the true extent of Ida's power. The witch had anticipated her every move, and the curse had only been lying dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With trembling hands, Anna dropped the jar, watching it as it shattered on Ida's grave. As the shards of glass glinted in the moonlight, Anna felt a strange sensation wash over her. Her skin began to tingle, and her vision blurred. She stumbled back, her mind reeling with the realization that Ida's curse had now transferred directly to her. In the days that followed, Anna's farm flourished, her crops growing taller and greener than ever before. But with each passing day, she felt the darkness within her grow stronger, the whispers of witchcraft echoing in her mind. She knew that she had become what she had once feared, and the cycle of curses would continue, passed down from one generation to the next. The powwow cure. Samuel's body writhed on his bed, his feverish limbs contorted in unnatural angles. His family hovered around him, murmuring prayers and desperately trying to soothe his convulsions. For months, Samuel had been plagued by this mysterious illness with no end in sight. The local doctors were at a loss, unable to explain or alleviate his symptoms. Seeing their son suffer was heartbreaking for his parents, who felt helpless and desperate. In a last-ditch effort to save their son, they turned to an old remedy from their ancestors, the powwow doctor. The family had heard of his success in healing even the most stubborn of ailments through occult rituals and were willing to try anything at this point. The powwow doctor arrived at the house on a dark and stormy night. He was a tall and imposing figure, draped in animal furs and adorned with feathers and bones. His weathered face held a look of ancient wisdom as he surveyed Samuel's condition with a critical eye. With the family gathered around, the powwow doctor began his ritual. He chanted strange incantations while sprinkling herbs over Samuel's body. He lit candles and burned sage, filling the room with an intoxicating scent. As he continued his ritualistic dance around Samuel's bed, the boy's convulsions slowly subsided until he lay still, his breathing steady. The powwow doctor declared that the cure was complete, and he left as quickly as he had arrived. The next morning, Samuel woke up feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. His fever had broke overnight, leaving him feeling stronger than ever before. His parents were overjoyed, but also confused. How could this stranger have cured their son with his magic when all other efforts had failed? When they asked Samuel about his experience during that night, he told them that he had dreamt of the powwow doctor visiting him in ethereal form. In the dream, the doctor had explained that his illness was caused by dark spirits. Then, in the dream, the powwow doctor had spent hours intoning strange Germanic chants by Samuel's bedside, drawing elaborate hex signs in chalk and sprinkling a bundle of herbs through the sick room in billowing clouds of pungent smoke. At last he declared the source of his torment, a malicious hex born of jealousy, which he had now lifted through esoteric powers. Within days, indeed, Samuel's convulsions ceased and his strength returned. The Browcheray Book. Amanda and her family were in awe of the discovery they made in their own home. The Browcheray Book. It contained knowledge and spells that had been passed down through generations, and now it was in their possession. As Amanda pored over the pages, she couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging and purpose. Her family had always been considered outsiders, even in their community, but now she realized they had a powerful secret, one that could help not only themselves, but also those around them. With the guidance of the book, Amanda began practicing Browcheray, using herbs, potions, and incantations to heal the sick, protect crops from pests, and even bring rain during dry spells. The villagers started to see her family in a different light, no longer outcast, but instead revered for their abilities. However, not everyone was happy with the newfound power. A group of jealous townspeople accused them of witchcraft and demanded that they be banished from the community. In a town meeting, filled with heated arguments and accusations, Amanda's brother stood up and revealed the truth about their Browcheray book. It was not witchcraft, he insisted, but instead a sacred tradition passed down by their ancestors. The atmosphere changed immediately as people realized maybe they were mistaken. They were shamed for doubting Amanda's family and begged for forgiveness. From that day on, Amanda's family were no longer shunned or feared. They were respected members of the community. As time went on, Amanda continued to use Browcheray to help her family and neighbors, but she also knew that with great power comes great responsibility. She made sure to use it only for good purposes and taught her children how to do the same. Generations later, their farm was nothing more than a memory. The land had been sold and divided among different families, but the legacy of Browcheray continued on. In a small town nestled in the hills of Pennsylvania, Sarah Miller sat at her grandmother's feet, listening intently as she recounted stories from long ago. Sarah's grandmother was a direct descendant of Amanda, and she still practiced Browcheray in secret. It was a tradition passed down through the women in their family, each one taking on the role of healer and protector in their community. But with each passing generation, the practice had become more hidden and shrouded in secrecy. Sarah's grandmother explained that in modern times, People were quick to dismiss brochure as superstition or even witchcraft. They feared what they didn't understand, and so the tradition had to be kept quiet. But Sarah couldn't understand why they had to hide something that helped so many people. She longed to learn more about brochure and carry on her family's legacy. And so, her grandmother began teaching her everything she knew, from identifying medicinal herbs to casting spells for protection. As Sarah grew older, she became bolder with her practice. She used brochure openly to help those in need, whether it was curing an illness or bringing luck to a struggling farmer's crops. Many people in the Amish community started to seek out Sarah for help and guidance. They saw her as a wise woman with special powers, just like their ancestors had with Amanda centuries ago. One day, while rummaging through her grandmother's old trunk of belongings, Sarah stumbled upon an old book wrapped in cloth. As she carefully unraveled it, she couldn't believe what lay before her eyes. It was the brochure book that they assumed had been lost for generations. Excitedly, Sarah rushed to show her find to her grandmother. Together, they pored over the pages, rediscovering forgotten spells and remedies. The Vengeful Dundle Maker. The legend of the Dundle Maker has been passed down for generations in the Amish community. A cautionary tale used to scare children into good behavior. They were warned never to wander into the woods alone, or else they may fall victim to her vengeful hexes. But as time went on and the story was told over and over, it became more of a fairy tale than a reality. The Dundle Maker was just a scary bedtime story, right? Elise thought so, until one night she heard strange noises coming from the woods behind her farm. Against her better judgment, she followed the sound, curious to see what was making such eerie noises. As she approached a clearing in the woods, Elise saw an old woman hunched over a cauldron bubbling with unknown contents. She looked up at Elise with piercing eyes and cackled wickedly. Who are you?" Elise asked, trying to hide her fear. "I am the Dundle Maker," the old woman replied with a toothy grin. "And you are trespassing on my land." Elise's heart raced as she remembered the warnings about this mysterious woman. But before she could turn and run, the Dundle Maker spoke again. "Do not be afraid, child. I mean you no harm," she said, gesturing for Elise to come closer. Curiosity getting the best of her, Elise cautiously approached the cauldron and peered inside. To her surprise, it was filled with herbs and roots, not some concoction of evil magic as she had imagined. "Why do they call you the Dundle Maker?" Elise asked bravely. The old woman sighed heavily before telling her story. Long ago, she had been in love with an Amish man who promised to marry her despite their different backgrounds, he being Amish and she being an English outsider known for practicing hexes. But when she became pregnant with his child, he abandoned her, leaving her to raise the child alone. To those who crossed her, the Dundle Maker would fashion garish poppets or dundles from corn husk and hair, twisting them into disturbing forms with grotesque faces, then muttering vile curses over them by candlelight. Soon after, misfortune would descend. Strange wasting sicknesses, disfiguring rashes, horrific accidents, even death, fueled by the Dundle's baleful magic. No one knows what became of the Dundle Maker, but the children are still warned. Speak ill of the Amish way, and she may come for you next. Well, friends, the tales you have just heard are more than just mere stories and legends. They are warnings, reminders of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. In the Amish community, where faith and simplicity reign, these encounters with witchcraft and dark forces serve as sobering lessons. They remind us of the power of the unseen and the importance of respecting forces beyond our understanding. As you leave these tales behind and lay down to sleep, remember the shadows that linger in the corners of our world and the ancient wisdom that cautions us to tread carefully. The night holds secrets, and sometimes it is best to let them be.